It's 4:30. I'm going to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the District of Tofino operates within the territory of the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation, Tla-o-qui-aht. Notice to attendees that the meeting is being video recorded and will be published on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. And a notice to virtual attendees to sign up for a public comment and question period using the Q&A function in Zoom. To register, participants are required to enter their full name, residential address, and the agenda item they wish to speak to. Through unanimous consent, if there are no objections, I'll move that pursuant to Section 15 of the District of Tofino Meeting Procedure Bylaw number 1229, 2016 is amended, the May 14th, 2024 regular meeting be held electronically via Zoom and live broadcasted on the District YouTube channel, that the facility provided for the public to watch and hear the meeting be located at Municipal Hall, 380 Campbell Street in Tofino, BC. Seeing no motion, that motion is carried. To the consent agenda. Also through unanimous consent, if there are no objections, I'll move that item 4.1 to 4.6 of the consent agenda on the regular council meeting held May 14th, 2024 be approved and received. Seeing no objections, that motion is carried. Also through unanimous consent, if there are no objections, I move that the audit committee recommend to council the acceptance of the consolidated financial statements for the District of Tofino for the year ending December 31st, 2023. Seeing no objection, that motion is carried. Also through unanimous consent, if there are no objections, I'll move that the minutes of the audit committee held May 9th, 2024 be received. Seeing no objections, the motion is carried. We have public comment on agenda items. Mr. Shorthall, I have one here. Is there anybody online?
There are some individuals attending online, so I'm going to open call for anyone wishing to make a comment to council. You can do so now by raising your hand via Zoom. You need to state your name, your address, and the agenda item you're speaking to. Calling once, calling twice, calling 3 times. There's nobody online, but I believe we have at least 2 people here in Council Chairperson.
Okay, so I have one here, Mr. Harold Sadler. Would you like to come on up?
Okay, right now. All right.
You're up. So do state your name, the agenda item you wish to speak to, and of course restrict your comments to the agenda item. And you do have 2 minutes, so I'll stop you 2 minutes.
Okay.
But, you might have some more. I hear you might have some more. So what we'll do is we'll stop you at 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Somebody else has a chance, and then we'll have some time, and you can carry on.
I shouldn't be more than 2 minutes.
Okay.
I tend to talk fast, so I'll try and slow it down because we're not doing 5 steamboats here. So. Okay, my name's Harold Sadler. I live at 1101 Fellowship Drive, and I'm speaking to my wife's and my Melody's and I request to have a temporary use permit for our formerly legally non-conforming short-term rental on the property. So I've been here since I was 4. I'm now. Was that the right information?
That's perfect.
Okay,
go on.
Thanks. I'm now 62. I'm applying for a temporary use permit to operate a former legally non-conforming 3-room short-term rental. My wife Melody and I built the main house in '97. We started operating that STR out of our house in 2000, and we have done so for the 24 years since. During that time, we've raised a family of 3 boys here and participated in the community working and volunteering, especially my wife. We built an addition to the house in '07, which added 1 bedroom and brought the total number of bedrooms up to 3. At that time, we were inspected and approved by district bylaw staff who were happy to have us in business, as in those early years, locals were encouraged to invest and participate in this way in the booming tourism economy. However, over time, that positive attitude began to change, and there was the technical changes in the bylaws regarding room layout that led to us receiving a legal non-conforming designation in 2016. Currently, our short-term rental provides the only income for my wife and I since I was injured in 2013 and was unable to continue in carpentry. We're now close to our senior years, and our plan was to use this business as our pension. Options for other income is pretty scarce now that I'm in my 60s. In addition to a home and a living wage for Melody and I, our short-term rental income also provides a home for one of my sons and his girlfriend, financial backup for another son and his wife as they try to enter the housing market, and of course, a home base for my family for potential tough times. It does not appear that we were the intended target of this legislation provincially, as the principal residency requirement was the focus, and we have that in spades. But because of our legal non-conforming status, we seem to have been caught regardless. However, the legislation specifically allows local municipalities discretion in allowing former LNC properties to continue operating as long as they don't violate the principal residency requirement part. And I'd like to think that our home-based short-term rental business, one like ours, that provides income for 2 seniors, a home or near seniors, a home for at least 4 people, and financial support for 3 others would be an appropriate use of that discretion. In this case, through a temporary use permit. It would give Melody and I some breathing room so we can decide on the best course of more permanent solution. And so the longer that TUP, the temporary use permit period, the better for us. I realize staff is recommending 1 year, but I would respectfully ask for more. If we could do 3, it would just be such a help. I really appreciate your consideration, patience. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mr. Sapp. We'll do one more call on Mr. Shortall from the public. All right. Just to state your name, address, and the agenda item you're speaking to.
It's Asia Drive, 1400 Pacific Highway, item number 10.7 on the agenda regarding rezoning of our property. I'm here to comment on the application for the zoning amendment to 1400. Our proposed zoning amendment would facilitate the subdivision of a large rural lot for residential development. There'll be no short-term rentals allowed, purely housing. I read the thorough report to council prepared by the planning department. I'd like to add a few comments. Planning department has recommended deny the application due to wording in the OCP regarding development south of industrial way. In the OCP, there is some language that both supports and there's also language that discourages our proposal. I'd like to quote some of the supporting excerpts that were maybe not included in the report. So section 4.1213, homes and neighborhood policies. Encourage incremental small scale development that integrates seamlessly with existing land uses in order to sustain the character of the community. 4.1235, ensure that new forms of residential development are compatible with the neighborhood in scale and design and are appropriately located. Rural policies, 5.6, maintain a large lot, very low density residential rural character in rural areas. And also in 2.3, balancing the needs for homes while being environmentally responsible and maintaining a rural feel. Now, our proposal is very low density. It is in line with current OCP land uses as we're a rural designation in the OCP and we're applying for a rural zoning. And it also helps to maintain the diversity of housing in the community. There's been a lot of focus on densifying the downtown core, and there hasn't been a lot of focus on other forms of housing. And I understand it's South Industrial Way, and you guys want to focus on the affordable side of things. But I feel like there should be some more diversity, and I think council should be open to outside other development south of industrial, because there is a lot of small scale local development potential there. I'm hoping today the council will consider the positives of allowing a small scale development like ours. Property is sitting empty and it's an ideal location for family residents. Our little beachside neighborhood is full of wonderful families who have all contributed to make Tofino what it is today. I'm looking forward to welcoming another family. And yeah, if you look on the map, or the lot itself is across the highway, it's divided by the highway. It's a very, speaking of planning in the past, they've had said that would be a natural lot to create. It's just a matter of what the OCP wording is at this point. So hopefully consider our amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Dry. All right, moving on. Oh, we got one more?
Yes, we had Trish here. We have one.
Oh, of course, sorry.
Hello, this is my first time, so sorry if I don't do it right. My name is Carol Marco. I live at 640 Mackenzie Beach Road. I'm here about the notice of temporary use permit application that was provided in regard to a lot on Mackenzie Beach Road for 30 trailers.
Oh, sorry, Miss
Marco.
Marcoux. This is a public comment for, is it on this? Is it in this agenda? No, it is not in this agenda.
Oh, I thought it was because it says you.
Go ahead.
Yes, through the chair, thank you. I'll explain. Apologize in advance, I'm losing my voice, but what happened was we sent out notifications for this particular application anticipating that it would be on this agenda. However, there was a need to reschedule it due to some confusions about some of the engineering information. So it's going to appear at an upcoming council agenda, probably the next month or so. At that point, we'll send out some notifications again. So I apologize, there were notifications that went out in advance, and the agenda item had to get moved, so we'll have to re-notify the council.
Okay.
I wasn't aware of that. So I'll have to get back.
Well, apologies for that little miscommunication there, but I look forward to having you back and speak on that agenda item when it
Thank you.
shows up on the agenda. Thank you very much. Okay, maybe one last call from anybody present for public comment edition. Once, twice, thrice. Okay, we'll move on to correspondence. Or sorry, mayor's report. It's the mayor's report. Yesterday was a scheduled emergency preparedness meeting with mayors, chairs, and CAOs across the province. Unfortunately, that with Minister Ma, with the Ministry, of course, of Emergency Management and Climate Readiness, and unfortunately, that meeting was canceled due to the Fort Nelson fire, the Parker Lake fire. So I was watching that very closely. And of course, all of us in council and our communities are thinking about Fort Nelson. And all the emergency personnel up there, they're fighting that fire and trying to save their town. And I just want to mention that we have one of our own up there, Seth Steer. Of course, Councillor Steer's son is fighting that fire right now. And so our hearts go out to Seth up there and all his crew. That they'd be safe and be able to keep that fire away from Fort Nelson, and that's a really good segue into just a quick comment on our own emergency preparedness. What is it called? Program. Thank you. Can't remember. It's emergency management, emergency preparedness program, and. What a tremendous program, and with one of the grant applications that's gone through in our consent agenda, if we're successful in our own emergency preparedness program, we'll have received close to $1 million in grant funding through the UBCM Community and Emergency Preparedness Fund, and that's just a tremendous asset for our community. And I know our emergency preparedness program and management team are excellent. And so it's just a big shout out to our team, and also a thanks to the province and UBCM for doing a good job and funding that. And we'll see the benefits of that investment, I'm sure, in time to come. This Sunday, May 19th, from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., there is going to be the unveiling of the George Hubert Memorial Fire Hall. Here. It's a great time. Unfortunately, I won't be able to be here. I'll be out of town, but I encourage everybody to attend and remember the late, great George Hubert and all the tremendous work that he did, both professionally for the district as well as privately. What a tremendous volunteer and a tremendous community asset, and look forward to that opening. Also was able to attend the CBT Regional Sustainability Forum. It's a great chance for me to be there and to see how many different organizations in Tofino and Q&amp and the regional district, Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation, etc., who are working on many different sustainability projects, from salmon enhancement on up. So to EPCAs. It's great to be in that community and see all the great work that so many good organizations are doing. That's it for Mayor's report. We'll move on to correspondence. 9.1, Charles McCarthy. We have a letter from the President of the Q&amp government regarding a request for a letter of support. And this is to help strengthen the Q&amp government's application to BC Housing's Indigenous Housing Fund. So, Council, comments from Council. Councillor Steer.
Yeah, if there's no other, I'd like to make a motion if we could to support. There is a template letter that has come up. There it is. Thank you, right there. Q&amp First Nation letter of support request to the District of Tofino Mayor and Council send a letter to support the Q&amp government's application to BC Indigenous Housing Fund.
Second.
Second by Councillor Master. It's a great opportunity to help other local governments achieve their housing goals.
Yeah, both Q&amp and the ACRD have already signed letters.
Excellent. Excellent. Any further comments from council? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. We have moving right on to presentations and reports. We have 10.1. We have a 2024 council grant standing committee, and this is a verbal report. Or do we have?
Through the chair, staff has no formal presentation. There is a report in council's package. And the task for council today is for the mayor to appoint 3 members of council to the council grant standing.
Is it, was it mayor? It's a mayor standing committee. Okay, the previous, this is a standing committee, so it's struck, filled by me, I guess. And then as soon as it's finished, its mandate is discharged until the next time. So who was on the standing committee for last 2023 council grants? Kat, who else was it? Wasn't it? I think it was you 3, right? Okay.
Unfortunately, I don't have the time for this commitment right now.
Okay. Would anybody else like to either remain on the standing committee or a new appointee? I think, what about you 3?
I'm happy to remain on. Yeah, you can put me down.
So, okay, so, all right, so now putting McMaster, Sloan, and Thomas. Then I'll move through the chair that a council grant standing committee be appointed to review and recommend the grant recipients of the 2024 council grants pursuant to the District of Tofino Council Grant Policy, and that Councillor McMaster, Councillor Sloman, and Councillor Thomas be appointed to the 2024 Council Grant Standing Committee. Second by Councillor Anderson. Happy he's not. Because he's busy.
I promise he'll go next year.
All right. Any further comments? Seeing none, most all in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. Okay. Excellent. Then we have a zoning, item 10.2, zoning amendment. This is 615 Campbell Street, first, second, third reading and adoption. And we have a report from Mr. Thick.
Good afternoon, council. Again, I apologize for losing my voice. So on the plus side, it'll probably be a very short presentation. So this particular presentation has to do with an application that council's seen before, but not for a little while. This is for the property at 615 Campbell Street, and it's a consideration of amending the zoning to allow a veterinary clinic permanently on that property. The application was received on April 14th, 2022. Council first saw it in December 13th of 2022. Since that time, there's been some back and forth with staff about continuation of short-term rental permissions, staff leave, as well as some changes to our process. So that's part of the reason why it's been delayed in coming back to council. The fault, I should say, lies primarily with staff and staff being on leave, not necessarily with the applicants. Currently, the proposal is the same. This was presented at permission to proceed. There was, as I noted, some back and forth between staff and the applicants about how to deal with short-term rental permissions on the property. However, what we're looking at now would be the addition of a permission for a veterinary clinic on the property and removal of nightly rental permissions from them. The property is located right on the corner of Campbell Street and Lone Combe Road. A fairly prominent property, probably fairly well known to council. Taking a quick look at our policy, really all of our major guiding documents are generally in support of the application. There's nothing that sticks out. So our vision to action, official community plan, housing needs assessment, multimodal transportation plan, land use demand study, various other acronyms we may be considering are all generally in support of this. It's not a tremendously complicated application. So there's not a huge amount of tension that we find in those documents that we sometimes find with other zoning amendments. The change that we're considering will actually just be a text amendment to the R1 zone. So it'll be specific to that property, and it will allow a veterinary clinic to occur on that property and remove nightly rental permissions, both short-term rentals and bed and breakfast from the property. So really, there's no concerns from a policy perspective that staff have to mention to council at this point in time. A few of the more planning kind of considerations, form and character. We don't anticipate any changes to the structure at this point in time. Should they look to change the structure in the future, it will be subject to the Gateway Development Permit Area requirements. And that'll be kind of a bridge we cross when we come to it. Taking a look at our housing considerations, the removal of nightly rental permissions from what was historically a residential property to contribute to long-term rental opportunities is something that we're very much in support of from a policy perspective. It's nice that this will also be enshrined in perpetuity. This isn't something that we're now making something change to remove that. So that is something that's well supported with all our guiding documents. Traffic access parking, there's quite a bit of parking available on the property. Due to the fairly minor change in the use, there was no big concerns brought up by our engineering department around traffic, and access and parking will remain the same. Servicing, again, no concerns. We're not looking at a big change to our expected service demands. Fire protection, and no concerns were mentioned by the volunteer fire department. Flooding and tsunami, no concerns there. It's outside of the established tsunami zone as is our current information. A few more planning considerations, community amenity contribution. Staff do not recommend that a CAC be assessed for this application. We're looking at potential kind of negligible change in the property value as a result of this reason. It doesn't seem reasonable to be assessing the CAC in this particular situation. The permission to proceed stage, council did choose to forgo holding a public hearing. If council wishes, we could schedule a public hearing moving forward. However, that hasn't been undertaken by staff at this point in time. Development cost charges may be assessed for the commercial area of the building at a future building permit stage, but they wouldn't be assessed through the zoning. What is likely to happen is that our building inspector will request a building permit application to update that area of the property that's being used for commercial use at this point in time. There'll be a fairly minor renovation, in my understanding, some exit lighting and a few other small things like that. But these may be assessed at the discretion of our finance department at that point in time. And then adoption of the same meeting's third reading. This is zoning bylaw, so it is possible to do that under the Local Government Act. As there are no outstanding requirements for a community amenity contribution, legal agreement, public hearing, these are typically the things that we stop readings for later through the zoning process. Staff are recommending that adoption occur at the same meeting's third reading. Here's the recommendation. I'm happy to answer any questions should we come.
Thank you, Mr. Any questions for clarity from Mr. Dick? Just great, you're off the hook. Yeah, just gonna note for council and anybody watching online or in person, it's unusual for things to be read like this municipal zoning bylaw, first, second, and third reading and adoption, but it is that option is in the community charter, section 480, and it is for the reason so that we can pass things that are obviously in compliance with their OCP, and there's no real concerns about this at all. So just wanted to clarify that for council. I do have that item right there I could read out, but I won't unless councillors want me to. Other than that, we can go ahead and make the recommendation if councillors want to.
I'll move that.
Super.
I move that the District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 132822024 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time.
Second by Councillor Thomas. Any further comments from council? All in favor? None opposed, motion is carried.
Move that the District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 132822024 be adopted.
Seconded by Councillor Thomas. Any further comments from council? All in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. Okay. Moving to item 10.3, we have meeting procedures bylaw amendment. We do have a presentation by Mr. McCall.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I'll be introducing meeting procedures bylaw amendment related to electronic attendances. So, background here on this process on March 12th. Notice of motion was introduced by Councillor Steer to create a provision to increase the number of allowable electronic attendances. It then went to a April 29th committee of the whole, and council discussed to find common ground on 4 provisions. Staff then took those provisions and worked to draft an amendment bylaw, which we then reviewed with our legal team, and it's in front of council tonight for consideration. So there are 3 sections of the Community Charter and the Local Government Act that gives council the authority. Section 124 requires council to establish a meeting procedure bylaw. Section 128 in the Community Charter and 465 of the Local Government Act provides the authority to hold electronic meetings. And section 137 of the Community Charter provides the authority to amend bylaws. The current bylaw as it stands, which we're all familiar with, allows council members 3 regular council meetings to attend electronically, 2 council committee meetings, including committee of the whole meetings, and 2 public hearing meetings. Further electronic attendances will be marked as absences. So in drafting this bylaw, staff referenced the guidelines set by a 2022 Ministry of Municipal Affairs document titled the Procedure Bylaw Guide for BC's Local Governments. This guide notes that this is council's bylaw designed as a set of governance rules set by council, present and future Tofino councils to adhere to. Procedure bylaws are a tool used to set shared expectations for process, procedure, conduct, and are provided to increase local government meetings, efficiency, accountability, and transparent decision-making. Through the aforementioned recent council meetings, council has directed staff to propose these amendments to address the following provisions, including increasing electronic attendance permissions, guidelines for granting those e-attendance permissions, an in-person quorum, and in-person chair. Here I will briefly go through the proposed amendments to be included in Schedule B, titled Electronic Attendance. In this schedule, Section 5 stipulates guidelines for the reasons in which a council member may request additional electronic participation entitlements and for whom grants that permission. In this proposed amendment in front of council tonight, the mayor may grant those entitlements, or the mayor, if the mayor is requesting, it will be the acting mayor who may grant them. And the reasons related to those allowances may be unforeseen, unavoidable, and or related to accessibility. So I'll now go through those amendments briefly, just so council is aware. It's in your packages, but for the public, Section 6 clarifies that any additional entitlements do not count towards a council member's calendar year entitlements. Section 7 stipulates that the corporate officer must be notified of all requests and approvals. Section 8 requires a majority of council to attend in person to all regular meetings. I just want to note here that this is not a requirement for special and emergency meetings, which would not require this provision. And additionally, if a quorum of council is not met in regular meetings, the meeting is prohibited to proceed. Section 9 stipulates that the chair must attend all regular meetings in person, and that if the chair cannot attend in person, that the acting mayor will be appointed chair or a prescribed person. And finally, communication and next steps. If council does choose to proceed with 3 readings of the bylaw tonight, staff will issue 2 notices in the Westerly News as per the provisions section 94 of the Community Charter prior to returning to council for these amendments for adoption on June 11th. That's the recommendation on the table for council, and happy to answer any questions for clarity.
Super. Thank you, Mr. McCall. I'm going to look to council for questions for clarity from Mr. McCall. Seeing none, would somebody like to read some more?
I'll move that the District of Tofino Meeting Procedures Amendment Bylaw number 1229-04 2024 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time.
Second by Councilor Master. Any further comment from council? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. Moving on, 10.4, we have an application for liquor license, Royal Canadian Legion, branch 65.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So council has before them this evening a liquor license application from the Royal Canadian Legion, and I have a brief presentation to walk council through local government's role in this process. Do I have the power? Thank you. So the Royal Canadian Legion, located at 331 Main Street, seeking to obtain a liquor primary license with a proposed capacity of 286 persons. They're also seeking a family food service endorsement so that minors can attend for specific events, weddings, services, things like that. And that comes with some other restrictions as well around food being on site and the children being under the supervision of an adult. And just as background, refresher for council, Royal Canadian Legion had an existing liquor license as well as legal non-conforming zoning from a 1975 bylaw, I believe. Yes, to allow their previous operations. However, after ceasing operations during COVID, lost both the liquor license and their legal non-conforming status. They're currently operating under a TP that was issued in November of 2023. So local government doesn't always comment on liquor licenses. I won't go through all of these, but these are the types of liquor licenses that local government would be invited to comment on. Things where they wouldn't be invited to comment, perhaps a private event, a wedding, things like that that occur on private property. So applications are made to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch. And this shows a map of what that process looks like from the applicant submitting the application to, if approved, receiving their license. And this shows you here where the colored boxes are, where we are in the process. So currently we are the yellow box where the application is being reviewed by the local government. And there's a two-way decision tree that comes out of today, which I will go through. So the local government has two options. One is to collect the views of residents regarding the application. Council or the district has a liquor control and licensing application procedure bylaw, what sets out what that process looks like. And, similar to a planning referral, it would go out within a 60-meter radius. A fee is collected from the applicant and the views of affected residents within that radius are collected. Staff would then prepare a report to council. That information would come back to council and council would have the option to provide comment to LCRB based on those responses. That's one option today. The other option is where the local government opts out of providing comment. And in that case, the LCRB will collect the views of residents and they may request additional information from staff, confirmation of zoning, that type of thing, to determine if it would be in the public interest to approve the application. And so there are two options. This is not the full recommendation. Those are two separate recommendations and council has a decision before them which way it's like to go.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fremont. Questions for clarity? Seeing none, you're off the hook. I'll go for a round of comments. If council would like to make comments, now's the time. Comments from council. Councillor Steve.
Once again, I think it's in terms of the feedback on this particular one, we've often asked for the public's involvement in these considerations. As we know, the Legion has been a long-standing institution in the community and has served liquor historically, and through over COVID, there was a lapse in that license. So it's not, in my opinion, a major one, but I do think it's important that we give the opportunity for the public to comment on this and to have a recommendation coming from council. So I will be supporting that staff gathers the views of residents potentially impacted, and for a couple of reasons, just with the residences in the area, and also the fact that they're in close proximity is another venue that does serve alcohol. So having two of those venues in close proximity, I think would be important for the public to be able to weigh in and have conversation and input into this particular application.
Thank you. Any other comments from council for direction? Yes, sorry.
I would be supporting the second recommendation, given that the LCRB will be conducting their own survey of local residents. And I do feel that the Legion operated for a long time with its legal non-conforming status. And I would be interested in hearing from staff the number of complaints that were ever received. And I believe the number is low, leading me to believe that neighboring residents were not, hard done by with their operations.
Councillor Steer,
Just in to Councillor, sorry. One of the issues around LCRB and their commitment to that process is actually negligible. I've gone through this many times and they absolutely do nothing. That's why in my comments that I'm particularly interested in having the community, because they do not do a thorough job at all. So that is my concern with that particular agency who I've dealt with many, many times. So I don't trust their ability to carry out the process in a judicial way. So that's why I recommend that we go through that process.
May I follow up?
you may.
Considering that the Legion is trying to restart, I'm also interested in saving them the $600 application fee. Given that ensuring their continued operation with having supports not only fish and loaves as well as the library. I'm quite interested in making sure that financially this is less burdensome on them.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have okay, we're gonna go over here just to.
Having had some experience with this in the past and having had to deal with all the noise complaints for the Legion, for once, I'm going to agree with Councillor Steer that we should seek the input of the community, because this will be the one time they do have a chance. And like Councillor Steer, I know the liquor board will do absolutely nothing.
Okay, Councillor Thomas.
I was gonna say that I obviously do largely support them having their liquor license, but I would be in favor of us gathering information and giving the community a chance to speak on it, just given like the nature of this. I know I was very much on the other side when it came into a recent one similar, but.
Super.
I just have a question for clarity. I don't, so once if we decide to go with option one, where we collect the information, then what happens?
I believe I can answer that. Or you know what, let's go straight to Mr. Vermont.
Through the chair, the district has 90 days after accepting the application or the referral from LCRB to process the application. The notification is set out as per our bylaw, the notification process. So it's the 60-meter radius. It has to be posted for 10 business days and 2 consecutive issues of a newspaper. And so that's the process we would go through. We would collect that information. It would come back to council in another staff report, and then council may choose to make comment based on that feedback to submit to LCRB as part of their response.
I actually have a question for clarity too. Sorry to let you off the hook and then bring you back, but now this is for the application for a liquor license. Is there any like if council decides to direct staff to gather the information and deliver a report to the Liquor and Cannabis Board, would there be any option in there to direct the any limits or time limits or et cetera with that, or is it just the license?
Through the chair, council or the local government has the opportunity to provide comment. What that comment looks like is up to the local government, but it is up to LCRB whether that license is issued and what form that license is.
So there's a well, sorry, just to clarify, so there is the possibility of a variable license where within that license there is some also other guidelines, the flexibility.
Through the chair, I'm not sure if I'm totally understanding the question. Do you mean perhaps different hours or something like that?
Yeah, that's what I'm.
The local government can provide comment, but again, it's up to the LCRB whether they accept the application as it's been submitted or modified in some way.
I got you. Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I'm in support of engaging community feedback, but I'm a little bit, I guess the part where I hesitate is that they're in the middle of a zoning process. So I believe they're still looking to rezone because they had a very antiquated zoning placed on them before, and so I guess my question or my concern is that people won't know the full use that that liquor license will have until they know what zoning it has. So there's some uses that might allow for a wider use of that liquor license, depending on the zoning that they land with. So, I mean, I'm okay collecting input, but I'm not sure if we fully understand, like, will it be a zoning that allows more for community uses and public gatherings? That end of the scale, I think, will certainly be included in their zoning, but is it going to be more akin to a cabaret kind of zoning, which allows for louder and whatever dances, performance events that have a noise factor included in it. So while the liquor license permits some things, the zoning will permit some things too, and then the combination of them will create maybe something that we don't know yet. So anyways, I think we should go ahead and gather public input anyways, but it would be good if we, and it would be good for public to be able to comment knowing where the zoning's going. So not to hold it up, but and just sort of bring that idea to light and see if there's anything about that we should be thinking about.
Maybe I'll look to Ms. Vermont once again. Now we have a district initiated rezoning in process. Where is that rezoning at, and is there we do know what that zoning is going to look like? Do we know it?
Through the chair, currently the Royal Canadian Legion is operating under a temporary use permit, which allowed them to get moving a little bit more quickly while they work through a full rezoning process. The liquor licensing application has its own referral requirements through our bylaw, but that is separate from the referral requirements that happen through the TUP, which have happened, and an upcoming rezoning.
So sorry, just a question about the rezoning. Is there Councillor Anderson's concerned that the rezoning may end up creating something that we haven't foreseen with this liquor license or this discussion? Is that, can you just have a quick little comment on that?
Through the chair, the rezoning will still need to come before council. And as council is aware, that can sometimes be a lengthy process, and that application may change as it moves through that process. So I don't think I can speak to what their final zoning will look like.
Okay, so there you go. Okay, does that satisfy? I think you're right on the money there.
Well, we'll have to look at the zoning with that in mind if you get the license in the meantime.
Yeah. Okay, well, I have, it sounds like we've got a majority of council that would like to opt for that staff proceed to gather the views of residents. Are there any further comments that would argue against that position? Seeing none, Councillor Zargar?
I would still be in favor of the second option, although I'm hearing that most people are not.
Just a comment for me, I do know this is going to cost the district and staff and time, and of course cost to the Legion, but I think there's benefit there, and I think councillors have highlighted the benefits, so we'll see that offset. So no more comments from council. I believe Councillor Sear would like to read the motion.
That the staff proceed to gather the views of residents potentially impacted by the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 65's application of liquor license cannabis regulation branch for a primary license for the purpose of providing the LCRB with council resolution on whether the application should be approved.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Master. Further comments before we call the question? Seeing no further comment, all in favor? Opposed? One opposed, motion is carried. Thank you. Moving on, 10.5. District of Zoning, District of Tofino long-term borrowing. This is for the wastewater treatment plant. Lots here. Satya. So we have a 2-hour presentation.
There is actually no formal presentation, but this was largely discussed through the financial planning process, so I spared council this evening. And I don't have a slide deck, but I'm happy to answer any questions. What the locking in of the long-term debt will do is that it'll mirror what we presented to council in the financial plan bylaw, which is hopefully adopted later on in this agenda. And it'll bring more certainties for our long-term debt payments as well as our interest payments on our temporary borrowing.
Go ahead, question.
Question for clarity. What is the resolution needs to be forwarded to the ACRD included in the regional district security issuing bylaw? Could you explain that process to me?
Yeah, so local governments do their long-term borrowing through the regional district. We can't do it directly. So we decided to skip the spring borrowing cycle and move to fall borrowing in hopes that we'll have more favorable interest rates.
Great, thank you.
I have a question. I read more of comment question. I read through all this and I feel like I should get a certificate.
Yes. I can prepare those.
That's great. Okay, well, if there's no further comment or questions from council, would a councillor like to read the motion?
That council approve borrowing from the Municipal Finance Authority of British Columbia as part of the 2024 fall borrowing session. $10 million is authorized to the District of Tofino loan authorization bylaw number 1253/2018, and that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District be requested to consent to the District of Tofino's borrowing over a 30-year term and include the borrowing in a security issuing bylaw.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any further comment on this, council? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed, motion carried. All right, we have TUP 0324, and this is for 1101 Fellowship Drive. Mr. Dick.
Hello again, Mayor and Council. So as the mayor noted, this is an application for property at 1101 Fellowship Drive. Council heard from the applicants earlier this evening, made some comments regarding the application. So we'll start with a brief background. The application was received on March 6th this year. The applicant has been operating a legally non-conforming 3-bedroom short-term rental operation. Would like to continue to do so. However, these privileges were lost under Bill 35, which came into effect May 1st. Nightly rental permissions do exist under the current zoning, but it's actually the configuration of the operation that's not currently permitted. The business has essentially 3 units that can be rented, 3 individual 1-bedroom units. 2 of them are rooms within the main house, and 1 is a slightly larger 1-bedroom suite that is attached to the main house. And the applicant has requested a temporary use permit for a period of 3 years. So the location is right at the northern end of Fellowship Drive. The top right, or pardon me, top left the corner of that picture is the highway, and then Abraham Drive coming up there that leads to Fellowship. So this is the proposal. This is a sketch of the floor plan for the lower floor of the applicant's house. Top left kind of part of the red highlighted area shows 2 short-term rental bedrooms. And then the bottom right is the short-term rental secondary suite. So the secondary suite is actually considered an individual living unit. The 2 STR bedrooms are part of the main house. But that's the area of the house that has historically and currently is being used for short-term rentals. The 2 bedrooms are slightly smaller. They both have attached baths, but there are individual accesses to each of those units from the outside, but they are also interconnected inside the house. And the secondary suite is as so taking a quick look at the policy, the primary policy that we use to review temporary use permits is in the OCP. It's actually the temporary use permit policy. Other aspects of the OCP are also relevant. However, one of the things that I'll maybe get into it a little bit later in the presentation that I want to mention is that temporary use permits are typically not evaluated quite the same way as a zoning application. Zoning amendments tend to be more permanent. They can be changed, of course, by council, but they are usually kind of development rights that are granted to a property in a much more permanent manner. So our OCP kind of speaks to these long-term future land use kind of projects, whereas the temporary use permit is, as the name implies, temporary. So the OCP, the general OCP policies are typically applicable. However, it's worth also maybe taking into consideration, particularly the TUP policy as well as other guiding documents within the district. So with that in mind, generally it's not well supported by overarching CB policy for housing. We have many, or I should say not many, but a number of policies within our housing section of the OCP that really discourage and look to limit short-term rental uses within residential areas. The Peninsula Land Use Designation as well does not want to see any more development. It is worth noting, however, that this proposal isn't going to result in any physical change to the house or the property. So it doesn't really represent a large new development, however, as it is an application from a strict interpretation, we would consider this a development. There is definitely some support, however, in the economic policies within the OCP. We do recognize tourism as the primary economic engine of this community, and having short-term rentals is certainly a contributing factor to that. So our temporary use permit policy, which is a very specific section of the OCP, is generally supportive of the proposal. It takes a bit of a higher level look at things. And really this is a fairly short-term land use opportunity that may serve as a bridge to other long-term change, whether that's a change in zoning or a renovation to the house or something further. There'll be really minimal impact on the environment. It's quite compatible with the neighborhood. Many of the other houses in the area are developed as individual houses with short-term rental uses. And there's a reasonable balance between public and private interest. The private interest, of course, being financial gain to the property owners, and the public interest being general support of tourism, economic drive of the community. A few planning considerations. So the zoning already allows the short-term rental use, just not the proposed configuration, as was mentioned. There's a few options available to the applicants. There could be a renovation over the next little while that would facilitate a 3-bedroom short-term rental. The extent of the renovations is kind of unknown. Other options would be to rent just the suite or rent the 2 bedrooms in the house. But renting them both at the same time, essentially you're doing what we would kind of consider a bed and breakfast as well as a short-term rental simultaneously, which is not being permitted under our zoning. The one thing that, is kind of relevant, I know we talked about this, kind of to no end for the last few months, but I think it's always worth remembering that Bill 35 removed legal non-conforming permissions at a provincial level. The District of Tofino bylaws have not changed around these kinds of things for some time. So there's a bit of an established consensus in the community about what we want to see in terms of short-term rental and other nightly rental operations within residential zones. So I think it is worth mentioning and kind of keeping that in mind when we're looking at these kinds of applications. In general, the OCP has broad support for long-term housing, limiting short-term rental operations. But as noted, it's not always strictly applicable to TUP applications. These are designed to facilitate temporary uses that may not otherwise be supported either through zoning or the OCP. Just a note on public comment, we received 2 letters of support after the notification went out. We did not receive any letters of notice. I also just wanted to touch, I'm not sure what happened with formatting to this slide, but I did want to touch a little bit on the staff support side of this. It was kind of argued back and forth, I would say, in my mind at least, as well as with some other staff members, whether staff should be supporting this TUP at all. I think I just wanted to touch on why staff have even supported a 1-year TUP despite the general policy directions and the historic direction that we've taken as a district around short-term rentals the past few years at least. Staff do support a 1-year TUP for the following reasons. A TUP is not the same as a zoning bylaw. We're not beholden to a perfect alignment with our OCP as we are when we're considering a zoning amendment. So it may be approved even when in conflict with certain OCP directions. The proposal does meet most of the TUP policy directions, so there's some good support there from a strict TUP perspective. And then we're also aware that we're looking at considering our existing STR bylaws over the next 6 to 8 months. And so it's likely that there will be some changes occurring anyways, and this does have a bit of a bearing on this particular application and the way the applicants look to potentially move forward with their current business operation. So I just want to touch on that quickly, and there's the recommendation. If there are any comments, I'm happy to answer. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Thick. Let's do questions for clarity from Mr. Thick, and then we'll do comments as needed. Councillor Anderson.
I just had a question about just the current configuration. It's the fact that the secondary suite is separated off. I think that makes the whatever the legal non-conforming. There's the issue. So I'm just clarifying that that's the issue. If it was part of the house with the 3 bedrooms, it would be conformed.
Let's go to Mr. Thick for that. And I think Mr. Councillor Anderson's question is there's 3 potential bed and breakfast rooms within the house, but one configuration is its own suite, and that prevents it from being a bed and breakfast proper. Is that so?
Yeah, thank you for the question. That's largely correct. The one other consideration is that we only allow bed and breakfast use in a house that has 4 bedrooms or less. So we can have a maximum of 3 bedrooms used as bed and breakfast rooms within a house, but that overall house can only have a maximum of 4 bedrooms. So I'm not sure what the actual total bedroom count would be in the house, including the 2 bedrooms that exist on the ground floor. There's a piano room. However, I'm not sure if that was always considered a piano room. That's recently become a piano room. When we look at counting rooms within a specific house, we look at the plans that we have on file for that house and what something was considered at the time of the building permit. So we would probably review the plans that exist and count up all the bedrooms, and then kind of look to see if there's more than 4 bedrooms. We may have to look at reducing that number of bedrooms. That's something that we've done for a few other legally non-conforming properties that are looking to come into conformance. So that would be a conversation we have with the applicant. But that is perhaps a more straightforward approach to doing this. However, as Councillor Anderson's noted, the suite is considered a separate living space, so there would be a need to somehow connect the suite to the main house before that could happen.
Okay, and then the other part of my question is it the license, or as the license has been issued over the years until now, was the total occupancy for 6 people and 3 bedrooms? Because the configuration you had up there, it shows 3 bedrooms, and I'm assuming each bedroom occupies 2 people, but so is it outside of this suite configuration, it's kind of falls into a largely conforming with our licensing?
For the question through the chair, that's correct. Currently, we only allow two individuals per bedroom within our short-term rental bylaws, and a total of 6 people per basically property for a short-term rental operation. Most short-term rental operations consist of, if they're looking to maximize that use on the property, would be a 3-bedroom house, for example. In this situation, we kind of have 3 semi-self-contained units that can be rented all together, but could also be rented individually. Yeah, so I think historically, looking at our bylaw record and our business licensing record for this property, there was some changes, where there was sometimes some advertising for additional people. However, that hasn't been the case for a number of years for the last several years of the business.
Council? I had just a question, Mr. Thick, and just bringing it up for clarity. I know our bed and breakfast rules differ a little bit than Ucluelet's. Ucluelet just come up with this one paper where everybody has to enter the same front door, essentially. But in Tofino, bed and breakfast can simply be a room joined onto the house. And in this case, I believe that the 2 bedrooms have exterior doors and they're self-contained, but they also connect to the house if need be through a hallway. So that makes them the bed and breakfast as opposed to the suite, which does not have a connection. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. The 2 suites within the house, or the 2 kind of bedrooms that are rented as bed and breakfast rooms, I guess we call them, do have individual accesses to the outside. The suite itself is kind of like it's a suite, so it's a freestanding dwelling unit that does have an individual access. So all 3 of the rental rooms do have independent access to the exterior. However, largely the difference is that the suite is self-contained and there's no access to the rest of the house, whereas the to the rooms that are rented within the house do have doorways that access the rest of the house. So you could conceivably go upstairs and downstairs through those rooms.
Gotcha. Thank you. Yeah, just for clarity, that helps.
Um,
Mr. Sawyer.
one more question for clarity. Sorry, could you please repeat, if the TUP is not granted, what legal operations would the applicant be able to go with?
Sure, yeah, thanks for the question again through the chair. The zoning allows for short-term rental permissions in the same way that any other RA1 zone property or pretty much any other residential property within the District of Tofino would be permitted to have them. So you can have a maximum of 3 bedrooms for a short-term rental. We consider a short-term rental occurring in a self-contained unit. So whether that's a secondary suite or a main house or a caretaker's cottage, a short-term rental happens in something that is not part of any other house or dwelling unit. So it's a completely independent unit. Whereas a bed and breakfast are within our definitions are essentially rooms within somebody else's house that can be rented. So they're connected to the main house, but they don't occupy the entirety of the main house. So in this situation, I think without any renovations whatsoever, the applicant could simply close down the two rooms that are within the main house and continue to short-term rental the suite that exists. Or depending on how many houses or how many rooms are in the main house, they could use the 2 bedrooms as short-term rentals and continue to 2 of the units. And then the suite would stay empty. The real kind of crux of it here is that we don't allow a bed and breakfast and a short-term rental to be operating simultaneously on the same property. And that's sort of what's happening here. We have 2 bed and breakfast rooms as well as a short-term rental in the secondary suite operating at the same time. So one or the other could be permitted. The other option would be to do likely a moderately significant renovation to either create an entirely separate suite for a 3-bedroom suite encompassing the 3 units, or connecting them all to the main house and somehow turning that into a larger bed and breakfast operation. I don't know, does that make sense? Does that answer?
It does. Thank you through the chair. I was curious if simply disconnecting the 3 rooms from the house and then utilizing one of the exterior entrances could get around that.
That would be correct. There'd be a few renovation considerations. You have to do some pull a building permit and do some fireproofing and maybe a few other things like that. But it's all these things are possible. It's more just a matter of cost and time to proceed with those renovations.
Thank you.
And just a question of clarity, I seem to recall that bed and breakfast, short-term rental permissions are only allowed in houses with a maximum of 5 rooms. Is that right? Total? How does that work?
So, yes, thank you for the question again, Mayor. The kind of the difference with short-term rentals and bed and breakfasts can get a bit confusing because we throw them all under the umbrella of short-term rentals. As a lot of bed and breakfasts in Tofino, are. For all intents and purposes, they look very much like short-term rentals. What we consider short-term rental will be in an individual unit, but it can have a maximum of 3 bedrooms. You can have 6 guests, 2 in each bedroom. You have 3 bedrooms, and that would be a 3-bedroom house or a 3-bedroom caretaker's cottage, or perhaps a 3-bedroom suite that's part of a larger house. The difference is with a bed and breakfast, ideally you're renting out individual rooms within your house. And so we allow 4-bedroom house to have bed and breakfast. They can have a maximum of 3 bed and breakfast units. So how that works is they would have 3 bed and breakfast rooms, and then they would have in the 4th room a long-term caretaker living in there, or the owner of the house, whoever operates the bed and breakfast would live in the 4th room. But that's currently the way our bylaws are set.
Just to follow up on that, so you could have an 8-bedroom house and run a short-term rental out of it, according to our bylaws, like a 1-bedroom short-term rental. There's no restriction.
That's incorrect. You would have. If it was a 1-bedroom suite and a 7-bedroom house,
yeah,
you could rent the 1-bedroom.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
Yeah, short-term rentals are always there a self-contained dwelling unit.
That's right. Okay, that's just what I was. For some reason, I had in my head that we had a restriction on the number of bedrooms that a dwelling could have total that. Besides the short-term rental, so yeah, I thought there was a maximum.
But the way we kind of think about it is that the dwelling itself encompasses the short-term rental. So when we talk about a suite, we talk about a 3-bedroom house with a 1-bedroom suite. We don't talk about a 4-bedroom house, if that makes sense.
Okay, that's great. That's a question of clarity. It's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And just one further question, just so we're clear that this, the way this is being operated now does not conform to any like present or really past permissions, really. The way it's a short-term rental and a bed and breakfast.
Again, that's actually kind of a bit of an interesting question. Currently, in 2016, they received a letter from the District of Tofino acknowledging that they had legal non-conforming status. They've been operating as a short-term rental, my understanding, since about 2000. We didn't actually have any sort of legal permissions for short-term rentals until 2005. So I'm not sure exactly how it happened to be. However, they were kind of acknowledged as a legally non-conforming operation starting in 2016. Yeah, that's kind of what we're operating from right now. We've dug a little bit into the previous business licenses, but we rely on what the district had established in 2016 for the purposes of what we're addressing right now. And so for something to be considered legally non-conforming, it had to have at one point been legally conforming. And the district determined that at one point this configuration was legally conforming and then passed into legally non-conforming status with the update of some district laws. And then, of course, that status was lost as of May 1st due to changes in provincial government, which is, yeah, kind of a funny sort of cross-jurisdictional situation. But that legal non-conforming protection is not anything that is allowed to be administered by a local government. It's entirely a provincial situation. They can grant that right and they can take it away. And as of lately, they've taken it away.
Okay, thank you. All right, any further questions for clarity for Mr. Thick before we let him off the hook and have a little discussion? Seeing none, okay, thank you. Let's go to council for comments on this, comments and discussion. We'll try to go around and maybe we'll do one round, and if we need to do a second round, we can do a second round. Councillor Steer.
Yeah, I'm going to be supporting the temporary use, and in fact, I will be looking at an extension onto that 1 year in the council. And the reason for it primarily is this is the exact situation that short-term rentals were created for in the very beginning within residential zones, was to allow local families to be able to participate in our economy. And so I'd like to see this is exactly who we want to benefit from, in my opinion, to benefit from this. So in the changing legislations that have happened, it has created this situation that we now have to deal with. And so I'd be looking at supporting this. I'd be looking at extending it. We'll take the middle ground. I would be proposing, staff has recommended 1. The proponent is looking for 3 and split that down the middle into 2, which would give time for the applicant to be able to look at what options may be available to come into the compliance in whatever format that they would find that would be financially responsible for them. So that's my main reasons for supporting this and for the extended period of over 1 year.
Okay. Councillor Sloman.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Steer. I would be more interested in going for the 3 years because I feel with running a short-term rental and bed and breakfast, your season of being able to perform renovations can be cut short. And I think that this individual has been kind of stuck in a little bit of limbo. And yeah, that's.
Councillor Thomas.
Sure. I broke it down into some kind of for and against temporary use permit, and kind of on the not pro side was that there's still the opportunity to kind of operate one or the other. We could be seen as kind of cherry picking things if we start just saying some bylaws apply to some people but not all others. On the plus side, they are only doing the 3 rooms. It is owner operated. Throughout their website and all of their advertising, they were very clear about the 6 people maximum. It was well communicated and documented. The applicants clearly expressed a desire to come up with a solution that was a bit conforming. So I could be okay with temporary use permit. I understand the reduced time. I don't think we need to do 3 years because I understand with the temporary use permit, there's a possibility for another one. And that could, and having a limit on that time kind of shows that we are being consistent with what we're looking for. And it does say, here's a time frame that we expect some action to take place in. I do feel a little bit just conflicted on the sense that I feel we're opening the door now to everybody showing up with temporary use permits, but I also appreciate that this is the avenue that is being taken. You know, the applicant throughout all of their advertisements have closed down the ones that are not conforming at this current time. So there's a clear willingness to like work with the district on this, which I appreciate.
Great. So just maybe just to clarify, because I'm just writing everything down here to consolidate at the end, you're generally leaning towards a short-term temporary use permit. Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I would be in support of the temporary use permit, and I was debating whether the 1 year would be enough time to come into compliance and sort of, and also kind of hurry that along. And because that's my goal, is to see, to use a short temporary use permit, in order to move towards compliance. And there's probably going to be a couple others that come forward that want to have some time to move towards compliance, not just to continue operations. So I recognize that a lot of them will have booked for this season already, and I think that's fair to work with people who fall into this sort of long-term, or sorry, I'm really tired tonight, so, but the removal of the LNC use puts people in a tough spot. So I think we need to be a little bit flexible on that, work with applicants that are moving towards compliance. I think temporary use permit is a good tool to help that along. I'd be in favor of 1 or 2 year term. No, not 3 though, because that would fall in another term of council and would give maybe an opportunity for another 3-year extension. So I want any short-term rentals that are looking to come into full compliance to sort of use this tool, and I'd like it to end in this term of council. And so that's where I'm at with it.
Okay. Councillor Master.
After reading the report and listening to what the councillors, I'm getting more amenable. My first inclination was to decline the application. And then I had read the report, and it was recommended a 1-year TUP to accommodate the bookings for this summer. So my inclination would be why 1 year to accommodate bookings for the summer. I think summer's over October and November. So I would support a 6-month TUP. And that would also be the time when the short-term rental regulations come into effect around November. So if push came to shove, I'd settle for 1 for 6 months. And I agree with Councillor Anderson that whatever's decided has to come back to this council. There you go.
Thank you, Councilman McMaster. Councilor Sawyer.
I would be in favor of one or two, given the same reasons that falls within this council's term. I recognize the time that it takes to, draft up plans and complete inspections and get permits for the construction, and that those things don't happen quickly. And I respect the applicant's efforts to come into compliance.
Okay. All right, well, I'm gonna go down the list here. I have, generally speaking, right, well, everybody is so far has been in support of some form of a TUP, generally 1 year, have 1 3 year. Councilor Sloan. I've got a question for Councilor Steer. More 1 years than anything else. Councilor Steer, if we know that you can get 2 TUPs, so whatever we give possibility of having back to back. So if it's 2 years, it could be 4 years, it could be 5 years even, or 3 years. So maybe I'm just looking at if we do a 1 year TUP, it can be renewed for another 1 year or more. And I'm just wondering if that would suffice for the 2 year. People who would prefer 2 years or 3 years. I'm just looking. Just maybe a question for Councilor Steer.
I think I would still support the 2 year, and the main reason is it will fall back within this council's term, and I think having this council very aware of the situation that I don't know how convenient they would be in extending a TUP further. So given the 2 year time frame, I think would allow the applicant the necessary time to make the plans, move forward with the as Councillor Sawyer pointed out, the bureaucracy that goes with that. And so a 2 year time frame, I think, would be legitimate, and having it within this council term, when they did want to go back for another TUP, I think the council here would probably have a strong recommendation of probably about denying that. That's speculative, of course, in nature, but I think giving the time frame initially, then we reduce the bureaucracy in another year's time.
Councilor.
Yeah, I think that the 2 year would be better because I feel like they've already been through quite a bit of change, and to have another extra year would provide them with at least 1 year of finding a direction even. And I just don't feel like 1 year would be enough to find direction to change of what they're gonna do and then do it. And then also I feel like it's nice to provide a bit of leniency because we're not gonna be gaining any living accommodation here. Like, we're not, even if we didn't, if we denied it straight out, we wouldn't be getting another rental unit or a long-term living. I still push for 2.
Just to comment on that, just have feedback. There is these are fairly self-contained, possibility that the applicant could continue to short-term rental their suite as is and rent the other bedrooms out long-term. That is a possibility. Rent bedrooms out, and so there is a possibility. So there is not necessarily, it might not be optimal for the applicant, but it is a possibility. So just for clarity,
Right, like as a bedroom, not a.
As a because they're like they're fairly self-contained. And have kitchenettes and exterior doors. It's possible that somebody could live there long term. So that's possible. Besides just leaving them empty. Just a comment. I guess I haven't spoken, but I guess so. Unless somebody else really wants to speak, I'll just have a little comment. My concern here is a general concern I do feel for the applicants, and I understand that they've been doing this for a long time. I do want to recognize that this setup, as it is, doesn't conform to any of the real short-term rental or bed and breakfast guidelines that Tofino has had for a long time. So the only thing that's been preventing this property from being forced into compliance is the existence of legal non-conforming protections. And so that's so if those weren't there in the past, this property would have been come into compliance one way or another. So that's and I think it's one of many. That's the problem that I see, is that this may be one of many, and So how we deal with this one, you know, as Councillor Thomas says, you know, if we don't deal with all applications in a similar manner, then we could be accused of picking some people over other people based on you know, some arbitrary values that we have, which is a difficult position for council to be in, to be honest. You know? So I mean, it's there, it's real. I personally would probably go for the staff recommendation, knowing that it can be repeated for another year. And then in light of that, we may have many more legal non-conforming or no longer legal non-conforming PUPs coming up, and I think we'll have to deal with them in a similar manner. So that's my one recommendation. I think that all in all, I just support the staff recommendation. That's where I'm standing. So I think we're kind of we got a little bit more commenting to do. We've got a couple 2 years, actually 3, and a couple 1 years, and 1 3 year. So moving to the center. Let's go around again. And let's see if we can be fine to consistent. We'll go twice. Let's go back to Councillor Anderson.
Well, again, I'll just say that the 1 year would move them along quicker towards compliance, I think. I hear you that you know we will see other applications, and are we going to say 2 years for all of them, 1 year, and that sort of puts me back. Could maybe just be more strict on it, 1 year, and then it'll be easier to be consistent with that if there are other applications than to say 2 years for this one, 1 year for this one, 3 years for another one or something. So we are at this point sort of setting a precedent in a way. What we do with this decision will impact expectations of other applications, and also, yeah, it will set a trend on council as well to how we adjudicate other ones. So that kind of makes me lean towards 1 year. Are we going to be in that situation though, if we do go with a shorter term, that we're faced with, in a year from whatever issuance of a TUP, that we're going to be looking at that second application over and over again. So so yeah, I'm leaning towards the 1 year right now.
Just another comment, maybe to add another thing in for council to consider too, is that we're actually entering into a rezoning review and rewrite, which will include a significant discussion and review of our short-term rental permissions, which may change the short-term rental permissions in various places, one way or another. That's going to go. So that's also something to think about too. That the process is in flux, and this is a dynamic. It's going to be a dynamic bylaw for about a year. I guess something to think about. Councillor Anderson, and then we're going to
just add one thing too that I was sort of considering. To me, this, and I can't tell for sure. I'm not a construction person, but it looks like a configuration of a house that's easier to bring into compliance than some of them might be. I don't. So as other applications come in, will there be arguments that, well, my house is really hard to convert, it's going to take me 3 years, and my house is easy, it'll take me less, you know, so could end up getting into that debate with any future TUPs that might come forward. So. Anyways, and I don't really want to get into that debate actually. And adjudicating everyone and trying to figure out at a council table what level of construction and et cetera. So anyways. It might be cleaner just to say that go with the staff recommendation and you cannot be a solution and consider every situation in detail.
Okay. The comments from council, go ahead, Councillor Sullivan.
Like, as you said, with the zoning bylaw review coming up, it's gonna be hard for them to move forward within a year, not knowing that we may change things. So I still think that maybe they might be tempted to wait because we could change the rules again and then they wouldn't be compliant again. So I feel like, I mean, if it was me, I'd wait until seeing what we decide, and then I would start drafting up plans to make my house compliant. And so I still push for it.
Councillor Steer.
Yeah, and I just wanted to comment on it's been spoken a couple of times about precedent setting, and I think the value of a council is the ability to take each application as individual applications, because each of them will have merits and be different in their own respect. And we should look at each one individually and make those decisions based on the information that we have brought forward to us. So in my opinion, in this particular application, there is merit in extending it to that 2-year period based on all the considerations that have been spoken by a number of councillors here.
Well, I guess the question here is the, comment on that to Councillor Steer is that we have a staff recommendation for 1 year. And I think that it's what I'm hearing from all of councils is it's a fairly not divided council, but certainly not a consensus of timing. And so I think that means that, in that position, it may be the most appropriate action to default to staff's recommendation, knowing that we can add another year or two on next year as time goes by without going beyond, without getting extended too far into the future. So I don't know, Councillor McMaster?
I tend to agree with Councillor Anderson. I think it's good for us to send a message that we want people to come into compliance. So I've been dragged from 0 to 6 months to a year, and I'm sticking at a year.
Okay. All right. Well, the recommendation is for a year. We can do it 2 days. We can just, sort of feel everybody out if everybody was going to go, or at least majority of council is going to go for a year. Or we could, feel how everybody's going to go for 2. So I hear year. Councillor Thomas, where are you at?
I would say 1 year.
1 year. Councillor Sloman, you're still.
I'll go with 2 to get more people, but
So,
I still prefer 3.
still for 3. Okay, so that's good. Councillor Steer, you're still at 2 at the minimum, 2, and Councillor Sawyer.
I would go for 1 based on Councillor Anderson's arguments and Councillor McMaster's.
Okay, I'll make the motion for 1, noting that TUPs can be renewed for, in this case, up to 3 years in the future once we see what goes on with the zoning review and rewrite. That'll give us more balance time, and it'll also, I think, give some leeway to legal non-conforming applicants, post-legal non-conforming applicants, but also it will also extend out to everybody. I think that's fair. So I think there's some leeway here. So why don't I tell you what I'm going to do then, since the majority is saying 1, I will read the motion as recommended by staff, and we'll vote on that. So from the chair, I move that the temporary use permit attached as Appendix 1 to the report titled TUP 324-1101 Fellowship Drive, continuation of LNC use dated May 14, 2024 be approved for issuance for a period of 1 year.
Second.
Second by Councillor Master. Any further comments? This is a chance to get us to deny it or sway it or whatever you want. Now's a chance. Councillor Anderson.
I just want to reiterate that my whole goal in looking at short-term rental uses is to move them towards compliance. So
Move them towards compliance. Yeah. And I think, I got to reiterate that for Councillor Anderson, this has been, the goal for the type of short-term rental that previous councils and this councils have supported is what we're trying to move these short-term rentals towards. So it's a continuation of many councils, I think, in a row. Any further comment? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? So we have 5 in favor, 2 opposed. Motion's carried. Okay. Yes, absolutely. Only privilege. We'll take a 5-minute break. Okay, we'll reconvene, everybody. 10-second warning. Thanks for the heads up. Okay. Great, Mr. Later, great. We have 10.7 zoning amendment, 1400 Pacific Rim Highway.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This zoning amendment application is the property that Mr. Guyton was speaking to earlier in this meeting. Sure, this clicker is working here. There we go. Thank you very much. Okay, so a bit of background here. Staff received a rezoning application to facilitate a single lot subdivision for future residential development in the rural and natural area designation on February 2024. Following a preliminary analysis of the rezoning application as communicated in the Associated Council report, which you received prior to this meeting, and summarized in the presentation, staff recommend that the application be considered and denied. So generally, staff recommendations to deny applications are not common, and staff typically discourage applications that don't align with district priorities through the pre-application process before an official application is accepted. However, regardless of staff's recommendation, the Local Government Act requires local governments to consider every application submitted. So just in very general terms, though there are aspects of the proposal that are worthy of consideration, the staff report ultimately concludes that the proposed development is difficult to support due to its relative location, residential form, and the current critical state of the district's water supply system as outlined in the water master plan that was received earlier this year. And here's a bit of site context. This slide shows the approximate location of the subject property relative to the rest of town, indicated by the red ellipse there. And we can see that it's located in the green designation, which is the rural and natural areas designation of the OCP. It's in the south end of town along the highway, just north of the Pacific Sands Resort, which is in the upper portion of that blue area, just below that red ellipse. Here's the subject property zoomed in a little bit, outlined in red. So as we can see here, the subject parcel appears to be bisected by the highway. And this was actually a result of a road dedication process resulting from a subdivision that occurred in 2021. So despite their disconnected appearance, they're actually these two portions are legally part of the same lot. So the proposal today is only relevant to the southern portion of the lot below the highway, which is shown as the hatched area on the slide. The intent of the proposal is to facilitate the subdivision of this hatched area. And in order to do that, the applicant wishes to rezone that portion from A3, which is the Forest Rural District, to A1, which is the Small Holdings District. There were no development concepts provided at the time of application, but any future development would occur according to the permissions of the A1 zone, which is intended primarily for low density, single family development in a rural setting. So this slide provides a side-by-side comparison of the permissions of the existing A3 Forest Rural District and the proposed A1 Small Holdings District. So as we can see here, the intents and the permitted uses are very similar between the two. The highlighted sections in the table highlight the similarities. The main differences being the types of permitted secondary uses between two zones. The primary rationale behind selecting this A1 zone is the smaller minimum lot area of 0.8 hectares that this zone allows, which is necessary to facilitate the proposed subdivision, in addition to its similar intent to the original A3 Forest Rural District. Part of staff's analysis was to conduct a review against relevant district policies and guiding documents. This table just summarizes in very general terms the relative alignment or not to policies that the district has. So when it comes to the vision to action plan, this plan really contains high-level support for compact development in a variety of housing forms. In contrast, the proposal would increase housing the proposal would increase housing supply, though it's not necessarily in the preferred form. For the OCP, I'm going to go into a bit more detail in a subsequent slide. But in general, there is misalignment with high-level plan priorities, which are designed to limit growth outside of the downtown core in order to achieve risk mitigation from flood and tsunami hazards, to achieve efficient use of infrastructure, and to reduce environmental impacts. An amendment to these core policies of the OCP would be required to enable the rezoning amendment to be considered. Now, the water master plan, this was completed earlier in the year, and it essentially helps to quantify the water system capacity limitations that were known in general terms previous to the study's completion. So, Council, as you know, that the study highlights the oversubscription of the system in the drier summer months when supply is low and demand is high. So though the proposal would increase system demand modestly through the addition of 2 dwelling units, any increased demand may increase risk to users of the system. Resulting from the water master plan findings, staff have been directed by council to prepare a limits to growth policy to better assess the risks related to continuing to improve development in the absence of a long-term supply solution. While this policy is currently underway, staff anticipate once it's completed, it will help guide decisions on how development should be prioritized in the meantime. So in light of the results of the water master plan, it's difficult for staff to recommend approving development that is not considered a priority use and in a non-priority location based on OCP policy. When it comes to the housing needs assessment, again, in general, this identifies the need for all forms and types of housing tenure, though single family development is on the lower end of that need priority. When we look at the multimodal transportation plan, there are a few limitations, primarily that it is located a couple of kilometers from the nearest service center, which could be considered not very easily walkable, and a few more kilometers to the downtown core, though the multi-use pathway is right across the highway and there are relatively nearby transit stops. So this slide shows some of the key policies that really make it difficult to support the proposal from the OCP. For the district-wide policies, the policies 3.9s and 4.125 are the most restrictive to development outside of the downtown area, and these are the main ones that would need to be amended if council wishes to proceed. Now, policy 4.121 provides direction on the general land uses that should be prioritized, and policies 4527 and 45218 guide consideration of water capacity. When we look at the area-specific policies in the rural natural areas designation, which is intended to support and protect natural ecosystems and serve as a buffer to provincial and national protected areas, policy 5622 discourages further development and subdivision. I want to note that there are several other relevant policies throughout the OCP that either further discourage or support the proposal. But these ones listed are some of the critical pieces that on balance reflect the overarching intent of the OCP to conservatively manage growth. If we look at more of a zoomed in site analysis here from those staff are recommending the proposal be denied. When we view it from a form and character perspective, staff don't really have any concerns. The size and location of the lot and its proposed residential use appear compatible with the adjacent low density residential and tourism commercial areas. In addition, there is an existing 30-meter deep covenant, which is shown on the slide there outlined in red, which spans the highway frontage that would prevent the removal of vegetation aside for utilities and accesses. And this would maintain rather the rural and scenic character of the area, which is stated as a priority in the OCP. When we look at the location of the property relative to the tsunami hazard area, based on latest district mapping, we do see that it is located in the 1 to 2 meter tsunami inundation area. Though development in this area is not prohibited, careful consideration of mitigation tactics through site planning would need to be considered should council decide to proceed. Some additional site-specific analysis from a housing perspective, again, as noted previously, despite it not being allowed with housing priorities, the proposal would add or could rather under the proposed zoning permissions 2 additional units in the form of 1 single family dwelling unit and 1 detached ADU or a secondary suite. Staff would recommend removal of short-term rental permissions as well that are currently existing under the A1 zone. From an environmental perspective, though the property, the subject area is largely vegetated right now and forested, staff are unaware of particular areas of environmental significance. The vegetation covenant would restrict the developable area of the subject property fairly significantly and maintain a good portion of existing vegetation. However, if council decides to move forward, staff would recommend a higher level environmental impact assessment just to ensure that there are no environmentally significant aspects to the subject area. I also want to note that the property is impacted by the wildlife habitat development permit area, which would be triggered at the subdivision stage regardless. From a traffic access and parking perspective, because of the modest density increase, staff don't really anticipate much traffic impact. I do want to note that the subject area is currently accessed through a private driveway that traverses the adjacent Pacific Sands property to the south. And generally speaking, to reduce the number of intersections with the highway, staff support the continued use of this shared driveway as the primary access. Again, should council decide to move forward, we would do external referrals, which would include the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, who would provide comments. Though, based on previous discussions with them, I do anticipate them generally being against additional accesses on the highway. Oops, let's go back. And then finally, from a servicing perspective, obviously staff have general concerns regarding the water supply as outlined by the Water Master Plan. But from a distribution perspective, staff further analysis would be required to understand distribution impacts. And if council wishes to proceed, staff would ask for a servicing brief and water modeling analysis. When we look at fire protection considerations, this modeling would also consider the necessary fire flows to address any fire issues. So this list of next steps here primarily pertain to only if staff, council rather, decide to proceed, despite staff's recommendation to deny. In any case, if council wants to proceed, we would recommend that the applicant submit a application to end aspects of the OCP that would otherwise restrict this application. And then we move through the regular internal external referrals process, technical investigations, a public information meeting, which is required related to OCP amendments, and so on and so forth. That's all I have. This is the recommendation that I have, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Later. All right, look to council for questions for clarity from Mr. Later. Councillor Steer. Yeah, Councillor Rose.
Thank you through the chair. Just a quick question. One of the guardrails or safety valves we have at the building permit stage, we can deny building permits in the event that we deem that insufficient water supply. And that would exist, of course, in this particular application. That was correct. Thank you.
Councillor Sawyer.
Same question as Stuart.
Councillor Henderson.
I'm wondering if we have particular concerns on the water and sewage system at that end of the district. It seems to me that a couple single family dwellings, unless they max out their whatever their setbacks or something like that, wouldn't require a servicing brief and water modeling, etc. And I'm just wondering, there's a lot against this application I can see, but that seems like quite an onerous thing to ask for what would, in my opinion, be a relatively small impact on the water system. So I'm just wondering if that requirement, if council proceed, if that would be a requirement. Because normally that's kind of a requirement with a multifamily or subdivision or something like that, but like a multi-lot subdivision. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thanks for the question through the chair. Our typical process is to go through a servicing analysis, but I'm not an engineer. Ultimately, I would defer to the expertise of our in-house engineering staff, in addition to our external engineers that we go to for these things. So to answer your question in general, I would basically put the question on our engineering staff as to whether or not they think servicing brief is appropriate given the modest density of this application.
So there would be maybe a different answer to that.
Yep.
Down the road. Okay.
Thanks. We've got Mr. Rogers.
Through the chair, I can answer in a general sense. If we would definitely require a service brief at the south end of the district, we have serious issues with our sewer capacity right now, and working on solving that. And so that definitely would be one concern for us. And the second concern is that the water master plan was developed based on the OCP build out of the current OCP. So this would be this would be different than what we've actually modeled. So we want to make sure that if we model that to just address any concerns. There'll be the two concerns. One is one that we're going to be talking about in the next couple of months, but it's the capacity concern. And I know that 2 or 3 units isn't going to probably tip the scale one way or the other, but it definitely is a consideration. And then the second piece would be whether the water main that we have down there is sufficient. Again, probably not an issue, but it's something with the situation that we currently find ourselves in with water capacity and pressure issues that we would definitely run a servicing brief. And we do for most subdivisions now. I wouldn't be able to put my finger on one in the last year or two that we have provided a servicing brief for. That being said, that wouldn't happen until such time as subdivision. So after the OCP and any feature zone bylaws, but definitely some.
first look. Answer, sorry.
Sorry, question for clarification through the chair. So what you're saying is those concerns would come into play after rezoning, but at the building permit stage? Or would those concerns exist solely with rezoning?
Those concerns would come up today in consideration of the amendment at zoning, at subdivision, and at building permit.
Oh, if I may follow up?
Yeah, sure.
How, just for curiosity, how are we able to address those concerns when there isn't a building permit present? Would we look at all various types of buildings that could be put on that lot size and then do an assessment for each of those possible uses, or would we generalize?
We wouldn't generalize, so I haven't looked at the actual OCP amendment, so we're going to A1, I'm not sure how many lots you could get out there, but we would take a simple A1 lots can give you X amount of units, use X amount of water, or deposit X amount of sewer, and that's how that would be the basis of the engineering review.
Thank you.
Yeah. Just for clarity, it's only one, the applicant is only looking for one lot.
Correct.
And so that would be two.
Maximum 2 dwelling units.
2 dwelling units, okay. Great. I have a question for you. This is, first one's a question, but I think it's pretty straightforward. This, if I'm not mistaken, this is the first rezoning application post water master plan release. Is that correct? Is that right?
I'm not exactly sure. Maybe first permission to proceed.
First permission to proceed?
Not exactly sure. Perhaps.
It is, yeah, so I just want to say it's not maybe, because we've looked at, and I just want to say for council, we've looked at other OCP amendments with zoning and they've received permission to proceed, but this one is just different for me in that it's the first one post water master plan. And just second question for you is it's the build up here as we're going into a limits to growth policy development over the next X number of months. Is it a possibility for council to defer this until after the completion of the limits to growth policy, so that we, looking at these types of rezoning applications, we would have maybe a little bit more focused decision making on it? Just a question. If we go with staff's recommendation and they were to reapply, it would start the whole process again. But if we deferred it, would there be any benefit to that at all?
Yeah, to answer the questions of the chair, I might actually defer to legislative services there. I'm just not intimately familiar with sort of mechanism processes and whether there's an advantage to defer versus deny now and consider it again. Or someone else.
Maybe Miss Tatiana.
Thank you. I don't want to pass the buck, but I think there's probably two departments we need to hear from, likely planning on process here, because an application has been submitted. But in terms of council deferring any decision, that can happen at a later date. But I just want to check in with planning to make sure, because an application has been submitted, that would be suitable in this circumstance.
Yeah, through the chair, I can make quick comments on differing application is fine. That happens not all the time, but it's a common thing for council to do if there's some issue that they found with the application that they maybe don't want to move forward at this point in time based on the application. They're not feeling that they want to completely deny the application either. So council can defer the application. There's no, to my knowledge, established legislative levels of service that a municipality has to oblige. So we could defer it until after that's completed. Typically, when an application is deferred, staff would like to work on it and rectify whatever the issue is that council has and bring it back before council as quickly as possible, as it's usually one that's been sitting in the queue for a little while. However, in this situation, if council feels it's more appropriate to wait until after the water master plan, after the limits to growth policy is established, I think that's probably understandable. And the applicants are here in work to the applicants, I should say, are here in the audience and are aware of that conversation. The other thing that I would note though, and again, I might go to Mr. Rogers to maybe back me up on this, but the limits to growth policy is largely going to be concerned with latent development rights. These are new development rights that we're considering right now. So it may or may not be applicable. Either way, I don't want to set council up to be in a situation where they think that there's going to be an answer to this question forthcoming, but it may or may not be applicable or as applicable as we might consider to a brand new zoning application.
Okay, that really helps. Thanks a lot. Mr. Rogers.
Through the chair, just to follow up on Mr. Thick's comments, we will be looking at future development as well as the OCP, or the similar policy, so it'll be future policy as well as existing. So it should cover most things, because obviously we're having this discussion at many meetings about many different types of permits, so I want to make sure that we have some clarity for council on.
Thank you. And I was just throwing out there's an option in case council, as council gets into comments and debate.
If I may make one more comment.
Please.
One concern I would have sitting in the position of Director of Infrastructure and Public Works is changes to the OCP that all of South Tofino rural, or what used to be called South Tofino rural. It would be an interesting OCP amendment to try to craft something that was specific to one property. That's generally not what we do in OCPs. OCPs are neighborhood level, community level projects. So consideration that our water master plan was developed of certain on this OCP, 2021 OCP, on a growth that recognized downtown as being important for South Tofino. So just to be that there may be a bigger conversation to be had about what does this look like for the next application that comes in as well.
Right. All right. Other questions for clarity for Mr. Later? Before we move into comments from council, and we can maybe thank you very much, Mr. Later, and we may call on you again as we go around and discuss this one. Or we may not. We may not need
Can I
to.
ask Mr. Rogers?
Absolutely, yes.
So that last question you asked, so what you're saying is like if we approve an OCP amendment for this property, it could affect all the properties down there?
Through the chair, again, I'm not sitting in the plan department. What I'm saying is that as Director of Infrastructure and Public Works, we just created a water master plan that's based on this OCP and its growth targets and its growth locations. And so if we're looking at amending a number of policies per the slide deck, and I'm not sure that we are, we would have to consider the implications of other applications as well. It would be really, I don't think I would have seen an OCP where you're specifically putting on one property in OCP. That's not what OCPs are. They're meant to be broad. Zoning is meant to be specific. Just a concern from primarily from state infrastructure.
Sure. Great. Oh boy. All right. Okay, let's go to council. Council comment. I do have one comment. I have a couple comments. If I may. One is the water master plan was developed out of 2023 data. And as I understand it, I've talked to Mr. Rogers about this, so please correct me, Mr. Rogers, but we're already approaching 2030 limits by bringing on our affordable housing units. So I just want to say that when we talk about the water master plan, as we go into that, we realize that it is already stretching into the future compared to that plan. So it is a real concern for me. The other comment I want to make about the housing demand needs assessments is I've had repeated issues with this with this report, and I just want to push back on the idea that housing for families is not a priority, because I think that was a mistake in that housing demand study, and it was that's my opinion that is a big need for our community. Our demographics show it, and I say it all the time, but I just want to reiterate it now that I do take issue with that. Some of the conclusions found in that particular report. I say that every time. You guys are gonna get sick of me saying that, but I do. That's all I have to say. So let's go to council, comments from council, discussions. Or maybe there's no discussion. I don't know. Councilor Steer.
Yeah, it's always great, but to have further information during this procedure part, because and I'm still sticking with most of it, but it did give me some, after Mr. Rogers' comments, it did stop me for a second in my original intent, but you know, I did struggle with this application, you know, as I take staff's recommendations very seriously. And they base those recommendations on existing policy and with the water master plan being the newest one to come into fruition. So it's very difficult for me to go against recommendations based on that thorough work that was done. And I thank Alex for his work on this. But at the same time, I think we do need to look at these applications individually and look at what the merits are. And some of the merits in terms of this particular project, the specific property, as you can see by the diagram, this property is already bisected, and the 1.1, I believe, is approximately 1.1. It's almost well over 2 acres. Maintains all of those rural characteristics that we're concerned about. The property, in essence, is subdivided already, in my opinion. And I live out in that area, so I'm very familiar with it, and I'm very familiar with the context of the area. And the adjacent properties, the adjacent coming back towards the Tofino end of town are all single-family homes on large acreages, maintaining that rural character. It will allow modestly, and as Mayor Law pointed out, in terms of the housing needs assessment, those family units, this is an opportunity to provide, as pointed out, modest housing increase with, I would say, limited impact. Once again, I'm not a water engineer, but with limited impact on the resources. And we do have, as Alex had pointed out, we do have guardrails, we do have safety mechanisms at the building permit stage. So this is a long process to go through an OCP amendment, and then once again zoning, and then a subdivision. This is a long haul project. So with those considerations, when it did get to that building permit sign, we still have a safeguard in terms of our water concerns. There was some of the comments that were made by when we do make those OCP amendments, and once again, these are serious considerations. This is our basic land planning tool, and I was curious to hear about, we never want to do a one-off especially on an OCP, and so I'm struggling to figure that out in my head, and it just came up now. So I'll continue with what I was thinking, but. The one concern, ironically, that's and I live right there, is the tsunami and inundation zone. It is a consideration to allow to put further people into those areas. So that was one of my concerns. I will support, however, a permission to proceed at this point in time, recognizing that there was a very a clear recommendation from staff on this, but I think there are merits to this project to support looking at least that permission to proceed.
Councilor Sawyer.
I'm in line with many of Councillor Steer's comments. I believe that the subdivision would bring on 2 minimal properties that like it was mentioned, we still would have the guardrails at the building permit stage. I generally support the subdivision in this way of the larger properties because I do believe that it makes properties more attainable to more people in town. And single family dwellings, though not the most high priority goal, they are still a goal to be able to provide. And this type of subdivision would allow home occupations, which many of our attainable housing units do not support most home occupations. So I think that would, with the removal of short-term rental permissions, be creating housing and diverse housing options within the district. And with the 30-meter covenant setback, it would retain the character.
Okay, Councilor Anderson.
Well, I mean, when I first learned of this, I thought, yeah, it seemed like an easy and sensible thing to do because of the lot being divided to subdivide part of that off. And Looking into the report, I didn't know that a rezone, requires a rezoning and an OCP amendment. And that's the point. If it proceeds, I'd be really looking at the impact of the OCP amendment. I at first reading that staff's report, I thought it was one of those cases where our red tape, our bureaucracy, whatever you want to call it, our policies sort of flew in the face of what just made sense to create this lot on what is already divided off by the highway. So there's the struggle for me. Are we going to respect our policies, which is what staff is guided by in writing these reports that are, have been developed with full community input in looking at a big picture kind of scenario? Or are we going to sort of let it be chipped away at and eroded by OCP amendments here and there? So, if it does go to proceed, I'd really be looking at the impact of those OCP amendments when they're proposed and brought forward. It's an awful lot of work to create for a couple of dwellings. So, all the other concerns around the water and demands on that south system that we know is stretched, I don't know, to its limits, but it's certainly stretched. Those can be dealt with at building permit level, and I'm fully aware of that. But I think the question for me is not so much that sort of just makes good sense to create this lot, let's do it, up against our policies that also have been developed with an overarching good sense to them as well. So that's where I struggle with it, even though it seems really supportable at face value. When you dig down into it a bit, it's a little bit cumbersome, and not just to support the bureaucracy and the red tape and the things that we sometimes hate about government. They have been, especially our OCP has been developed with a lot of community input and thought behind it. So there it is. There's the rough one.
Councilor Master?
Yeah, when I read the report, my first inclination was to allow it to proceed because, as the report stated, there was points in favour in the OCP and points against, and I actually thought the points in favour were stronger than the points against. The single family dwelling might not be the highest priority, but it's still building homes, so which we all know we need. As soon as you mention water, that's a red flag to everybody in this room. Tsunami induction area, well, Pacific Sands is there, so it's pretty hard to clamp down. And I listened to Councillor Anderson, I share his concerns about the OCP, so if there was an option to defer, or we consider the growth limitation report, I would defer it. If push came to shove, I would opt to proceed.
Mr. Thomas?
I don't know if I have anything to add that hasn't already been said. It feels very thorough. I think I agree with most people that on the surface, it seems an easy, the surface before you dig into all that, easy permission to proceed. And if the option was to defer, that might be more comfortable. I don't feel comfortable straight up denying this, given that it is. I know the OCP stuff gets very complicated. But again, there seems to be more that is for this than against this. I know that we have other permission to proceed right now that are coming with OCP amendments. Obviously, those are for bigger developments, but yeah, those are things that are.
Question, Councillor Sloan?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it just looks like the whole property line looks like it should be supported. It's just matches the neighborhoods. I feel I don't like amending the OCP, and we already have a few coming forward, and to me that is kind of starting to degrade the OCP. And then I feel like the water, it's like, yes, it's just 2 more buildings, but we have all this marketing out there that says every drop counts. So I have issue with that. So I would prefer to defer it as well, because I do want to support this. Because I do think, like everyone said, it's housing. We need it. I think that's the kind of development I personally would like to see with like forests around there. So that's about it.
I got a question for council maybe to consider is if this property wasn't divided by the highway, would council be the people that are support permission to proceed? Would council give permission to proceed to cut?
I wouldn't, if it wasn't divided.
If it wasn't divided, and I think maybe that's the question for me is this a visual thing where it's divided and it looks like it should be another piece of property, or is this, you know, would council do this for another piece of property that wasn't divided by the highway is the question I think I would ask. Councillor Sawyer.
I believe I would, because we have seen rezoning applications come through where people were seeking to divide larger parcels to make them more attainable. Pieces of property at its current size are not in the realm of purchase for most people. So I do think that we have supported that in the past, and I think that's what we're going to be seeing more of in the future.
You know, I haven't weighed in, but I think I'll throw my 2 bits in on the surface. Looking at this, like Councillor Anderson, like you said, it looks like a no-brainer. It should just be cut off. And when you get into it, it does pose some significant problems. I think that noting that we do have a significant issue with water and we've got a developer limits to growth, that we, you know, either go with staff's recommendation and revisit this again, or we defer it to after the limits to growth, and then give council a better understanding of what it means to amend the OCP, or you know, to get a better understanding of what it means that we're you know, it's tough for me. Tsunami inundation. It's a big deal. We did that. Or the OCP, it's a big deal. We did it on, you know, that was a community. You know, it's a community plan. Water, sewer, they're really significant issues. So I'm kind of down the middle. I think in some ways it makes sense. In some ways, I think it doesn't make sense. Once again, difficult to counsel. I'm not going to lead you one way or another, but it sounds like we've got 50-50 right down the middle for council.
Just one more comment. Several of the properties sort of along there, and then this might be a question for staff, and there have been subdivided over the years, but I believe that was not under the current OCP. I think our OCP, which has been updated, what, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, I don't know, where, somewhere in there. I think this is one of the, I can't think of any other subdivisions that have come forward since our OCP has been updated on that in that particular designated area. South rural. So at a time, I think we would have considered just about any lot subdivision out there, as long as it was still fairly large lots that were being created, quite supportable. But I think our new OCP is a little more restrictive on that. So that was one of the things, as I read the report, I was sort of struggling with, as looking at the lot and looking at the lots beside it, that, you know, there's some with driveways down the middle that are now 4 lots, etc., surrounding it. And I'm going, well, why shouldn't this lot be subdividable too? But I think it's kind of a new way of thinking of that south area. So and so I guess that's another question, is does that new OCP thinking not fit with the trend we've been going with? And maybe that's what we want us to do. So anyways.
That's a great question for perhaps Mr. Rogers or Mr. Thick. Is I don't think there has been a subdivision since our OCP in the rural land areas, whatever it's called up there. But is that and I know I know many people have been denied, or at least some I know them personally, who have not been successful in even in their application process to divide out there. Maybe it's a question for Mr. Thick.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'll speak to it, and maybe Mr. Rogers might have something to add after at the end. The last, I guess maybe to start with, I would say subdivisions isn't something that comes before council. So there have been properties that have been subdivided out there, but those are latent development rights in the same way that building permits don't come before council. Subdivisions is controlled, by zoning. So right now the zoning doesn't allow the subdivision. If the zoning allowed the subdivision, we wouldn't be having this conversation. The last subdivision that occurred in South Tofino was the subdivision that created the parcel in question right now. I believe that overall land area was approximately 30 acres, and the current zoning allows 10-acre parcels or 9.9-acre parcels. And so that subdivision occurred because it was permitted by zoning. The last time that council, in my understanding, considered a rezoning application to subdivide in this area was in 2019. When there was an application for a property that exists there to be able to subdivide. I believe it's about a 2 or 3 acre part of the property, and they wanted to subdivide down to about 1 acre. That was denied by council at that point in time. All the existing 1 acre parcels that are out there right now were created prior to 2013. In 2013, we adopted an OCP that had policies for the South Tofino area that basically established a minimum lot size of 5 acres. So anybody who was looking to rezone to something that would allow them to subdivide to a property of less than 5 acres was denied. In 2021, council adopted an official community plan that basically restricted development to the downtown area of Tofino. Anything north of Industrial Way is kind of what we consider right now the developable part of Tofino. So that's kind of the existing properties that are 1 or 2 acres that are out there. Maybe there's even a half-acre property out there too. I can't remember exactly. Those were all created or allowed through rezonings that occurred prior to 2013. To my knowledge, I don't believe there has been a rezoning that has facilitated subdivision since 2010 or 2011, but certainly not since 2013. Any subdivisions that have occurred out there since 2013 have been allowed by zoning that was previously in place. So yeah,
That helps me a lot. That's good. Yeah. That's very helpful. So that actually does I mean, that does really sway me personally to go with staff's recommendation. Say let's stick with the existing zoning and stick with the OCP and hold the line, even though obviously it doesn't, it looks like a great lot. That would be my I go to, and then after we have the limits to growth policy and the zoning review and rewrite, and then maybe some of these things can be looked at en masse or not. I think that would be difficult as it is. Yes, Councillor Sawyer.
I'm just wondering if there might be other people who were in favor or in favor of deferring, if we could move that to deferring. Rather than going with staff's recommendation of denying.
I mean, we have a recommendation to deny. It's a possibility, obviously, that we can defer after, then that would be have to be a specific deferral. You can't defer it indefinitely. It has to be, deferred till after the limits of growth policy is adopted, etc.
That is what I'd be interested.
That's a possibility. I think, but I think in my mind, just be thinking about the difference. And sorry about the difference between subdivision and rezoning. We're rezoning. This is a rezoning. It's not a subdivision, and there may be. So that was thanks. I should remember that, but that is a significant issue difference here for me. So I think that bears into this conversation. Go ahead, Councillor Steer.
Yeah, and thank you, and I agree with all the points that have been made, but the one thing I do always want to bring up, we have to look at each application individually, and when we blanket them all, I think we've run into issues, and we have policies to guide us, and that's important, and we've had staff very clearly articulate through this report. But I think we have to look at this application as an individual application. There were other applications in the past. I sat on council for those, and I understand the reasons that those were denied are very different than why this way has been potentially to be denied. What I would suggest, because this could go on for a while, I may suggest that I would like to make the motion to grant permission to proceed for 1400 Pacific Rim Highway and have a vote on it.
You can do that. Usually it's nice to get the round table over, but I'll go for that if you want to make that.
You can still make debate once the motion's on the table.
You can put that motion on the table and go ahead.
I will move that grant permission to proceed for 1400 Pacific Rim Highway.
Second.
Second by Councillor Sawyer. What further comments? Councillor Thomas.
I don't think I'm comfortable with permission to proceed, given that we don't know the scope of all of the details of what would need to happen for the OCP amendments. When we were given presentations with the recommendation for permission to proceed with OCP amendments, usually those were outlined quite in detail for consideration, and not having that information in front of us or having looked at that information doesn't make me comfortable moving ahead.
Okay. That's my answer.
Having listened to Peter just now, I'm changing my mind. I'll still say I'll probably prefer to defer, but I'm not inclined to proceed.
Okay. Sloan?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor McMaster. I would prefer to defer rather than proceed.
Okay, Councillor Anderson. The motion on the table is to.
Yeah, my preference would be to defer.
Well, then the question, the motion on the table is to grant permission to proceed. There's no further comments. I'll call the question. All in favor? All opposed? Motion is denied. Then what we can do is we can make a motion to defer. I think that's what the majority of council is looking for. So I'll make a motion to defer until after the limits of growth policy has been adopted.
I'll second.
Second by Councillor Steer.
I would like to make a comment.
And Councillor Steer can make a comment.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my only reluctance to going through the deferral, as staff has pointed out, there are some considerations for the deferral. To me, it's just pushing it down the road. But that being said, I do respect the fact that we do have a few reports coming up that may help inform council's decision on that. So I accept the deferral process as a legitimate way forward.
And I also want to say too that this is an opportunity for council to go back and review OCP amendments, what that means, and what it means to review the OCP yourselves. So if we come back and discuss it again, we have a little bit more to go. So that's my comments. If there are any further comments from council, seeing none, this is a motion to defer until after the limits to growth policy has been adopted. All in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. Okay. Moving on to item 11.1, we have District of Tofino Financial Plan Bylaw for adoption. There's no comments from council, then we can go straight to this recommendation.
I'll move that the District of Tofino's 2024 to 2028 financial plan bylaw number 1344 2024 be adopted.
Second by Councilor Master. Any further comments from council? All in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. Councilor Steer, go ahead and read 11.2.
Thank you. The District of Tofino 2024 annual tax by number 1345 2024 be adopted.
Second by Councilor Master. Any further comments from council? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion is carried. Do we have any committee and external appointment reports?
So I met with the advisory committee and been identified that the Kids Access Fund is starting to become oversubscribed, or not maybe oversubscribed, but very well subscribed. And it may need an additional funding source eventually, or a more permanent funding source coming up.
If I could maybe just, yeah, and if I could just add to that, there was you may have saw, if you read the minutes for the advisory committee, that there was a recommendation to council to, I can bring it up here. I don't know if this would be the appropriate time to make that motion, if I can find it in there.
Let's put that on a future.
Okay.
Any other committee external appointment reports?
Recently attended the VRL Executive Committee meeting. Quite informative, and there should be some interesting conversations coming out of the next board meeting.
Great. All right. Moving into question period. Mr. Shortall.
Thank you, Mayor Love. I will do a call now to our attendees via Zoom. If they'd like to make or ask a question of council, they can do so by raising their hand via Zoom. You need to state your name, your address, and the agenda item you're speaking to. Calling once, calling twice, calling 3 times, and no questions at this moment. Mayor Love.
Okay, well then I'll move from the chair into the closed session. I move that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 91A, C, F, K, and 92B of the community charter to discuss matters related to 91A, personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for position as an officer, employer, agent of the municipality, or another position appointed by the municipality. 91C, labor relations or other employee relations. 91F, law enforcement, if the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the conduct of an investigation under report or enforcement of an enactment. 91K, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of municipal service that are at their preliminary stages, and that in the view of the council could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality if they were held in public. 92B, the consideration of information received and held in confidence relating to negotiations between the municipality and a provincial government or the federal government, or both, or being a provincial government or the federal government, or both, and a third party. Second, Councilor Master, all in favor? Okay, we're moving to closed session to